Okay, so we got everybody. All right. Looks like we got everybody. We can start in just we'll start right at 10 since it looks like everybody's here.
This is a court reporter. If you're don't have your computer on mute, would you please do that now? I see two that aren't. Shockey and Van den Berger. Thank you.
All right, I think, Doug, we ready to go?
You're on the record, Your Honor.
All right, and I think everyone's here. So good morning, everyone. My name is Chuck McLean. I'm the Chief Public Utility Law Judge at the Maryland Public Service Commission. Wait, do we have somebody from staff? Yes, there's Lloyd, I'm sorry. Gosh, what's today? It's March 16th, 2021, believe it or not. It's approximately 10 a.m. We're here in case number 9013, which is in the matter of the petition for the arbitration of interconnection rates, terms, and conditions with Core Communications, Inc. pursuant to 47 USC Section 252B. Why don't we start with appearances? Start with Verizon.
Good morning, Your Honor. Keith Clemens, counsel for Verizon Maryland, LLC.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
And good morning, Your Honor. Susan Paiva, also for Verizon Maryland, LLC. And
Good morning, ma'am.
did you see that hot off the presses, my pro hoc order was?
I did. I hope you weren't stressed about that.
Just a little.
I didn't know what that was coming. I just saw an order. I was like, oh, this case has been decided already. So I thought.
Now, we've been working to try to get that order signed.
I'm sure. We can go to Core then.
Yes, Your Honor. Chris Vanderberg for Core Communications, Inc.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
OPC?
My name is Rich Shockey. I'm a consultant to Core Telecommunications.
Yes, sir. We're just, we're doing the attorneys right now, but thank you, sir. Good morning. It's all right. Can't hear you, Miss Ryan.
Sorry about that. Anna Ryan for the
worries.
Office of People's Counsel.
Morning, ma'am. And last but certainly not least, staff.
Good morning, Your Honor. Lloyd Spivak and Catherine Mackerlin for the commission staff. Ms. Mackerlin is having trouble with the link,
Okay.
but we'll try and get her here shortly.
You want me to try and resend it or?
Yes, actually, if you could do that, she would appreciate that.
Okay. All right. Let's just give me 1 second here. See if I can figure out how to do that. Probably shouldn't have promised that. All right. Let's see. All right, I just tried to send it to her. Hopefully it'll come through for her. All right, while we're waiting, just preliminary. I sent out some, I guess, I don't want to call them ground rules, but just some preliminary instructions, because I know some of you don't always appear before the commission. Typically how we do it, or at least how I do it, is I'll allow, in terms of cross-examination, party to cross, then brief redirect, and then I will ask questions of the witness. And then based on my cross-examination of the witness, I'll allow parties to ask further questions based on those questions, if that makes sense. So I just don't want you to kind of be holding a question that that you want to ask that you didn't have an opportunity to. And if I don't touch on it, you're going to be left sitting with that question. So please feel free to answer or ask whatever questions you have first go around, because you may not have a second bite at the apple. For the witnesses, I know there's a lot of acronyms in here. If you could at least state what the acronym is, the first go around will make life on the court reporter a lot easier. And I think that's probably all I have. Is Ms. Mackerlin still not what? Looks like she might be with us.
It looks like she's called in, Your Honor.
Okay.
Good morning,
Ms.
Judge.
Mackerlin, are you there?
Yes, good morning. I apologize for the delay. For some reason, I'm having internet difficulties, so I called in on my phone. I have for the delay.
No apology necessary, ma'am. All right. All right. Do we have anything preliminary before we kick things off? I'm seeing some head shakes. All right. Do we have Sarah, have you discussed it all? Who's going to go first?
Yes, Your Honor. Oh, go ahead, Susan.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yes, we conferred and we decided that Mr. Shockey would testify first for Core, then Mr. Mingo for Core, and then Mr. D'Amico for Verizon.
Excellent, excellent. And also, as I noted, this case is a little odd, not odd, but a little different from what we typically have seen in the past. We don't get a lot of these interconnection agreements, and since this has been around so long, I don't want to deprive anyone of the opportunity to get something into the record. So I will allow a brief rejoinder, sir, if you want to address anything Verizon indicate or brought up in their rebuttal testimony, and I'll obviously allow Verizon the same opportunity to do that. Sir, whenever you're ready.
Okay. We'll start again with Mr. Shockey. Good morning, Mr. Shockey.
All right, just let me swear him in. Sir, if I can get you to raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, yes, Your Honor.
Okay, can you state your name and spell it, please, for the record?
My name is Richard Shockey, Shockey.
Thank you very much, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Shockey. Do you have before you a copy of the direct testimony of Richard Shockey for Core Communications, Inc. in Maryland PSC case 9013, dated January 22, 2021, consisting of 17 pages and tabs A through E, which has been pre-marked as Core Exhibit 1.
Yes, sir.
And is this your testimony?
Yes, sir.
And do you have any corrections to make to that testimony?
Actually, I have a very minor correction. If you will look on page 17, line 2, there is a citation in the Code of Federal Regulations discussing the data that is exchanged between service providers. The correct citation is 47 CFR 64.1601, not 1600. Fat thumb day, as they say.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Shockey. And do you have any other corrections to make to your testimony?
No, sir.
And was this testimony prepared under supervision and control?
Yes, sir.
And other than the correction we just made, if I were to ask you the same questions here today, would your answers be the same as written here?
Yes, sir.
Core would ask that the PULJ move Core Exhibit number 1 into the record.
All right, we'll mark Mr. Shockey's direct as Exhibit 1 for identification. Any objections?
No objection.
All right. Hearing none, it's admitted.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to conduct a brief rejoinder testimony based on Mr. D'Amico's reply testimony only.
Please do so.
Let's see, Mr. Shockey, do you have before you a copy of the reply testimony of Mr. D'Amico for Verizon Maryland in this case?
Yes, sir, I do.
And turning to page 3 of that testimony at lines 6 through 7, do you see that Mr. D'Amico was asked, is Core's proposal to exchange IP traffic feasible? And Mr. D'Amico answered no.
Oh, are we talking about page 3?
Page 3, lines 6 to 7, just asking if you see the question and his answer.
All right, yeah, is Core's proposal to exchange IP traffic feasible? And I disagree with that statement. I believe it is entirely feasible.
And can you explain why it's feasible?
It's feasible because it is done all across the United States in various aspects. I would generally have estimated that approximately 70% of all voice traffic in the United States is exchanged via SIP and IP communications. So I completely disagree with that.
So can you explain, just for the record, basically what an IP interconnection is?
Well, an IP interconnection, there's two forms. One is data, which is what all of us are using right now, and then there is IP interconnection specifically for the voice communication services. And that is accomplished exchange of data between the originating provider, the terminating provider, at a mutually acceptable point of interconnection. And that is negotiated or mandated under several circumstances.
So how would an IP interconnection work in very basic terms? What would be
There is we don't have all day, okay?
Yes.
So, the way it typically works for the voice communications system of the United States is the originating provider looks at the destination for a voice call. There is a translation of the destination number into its underlying, what is known as a local routing number, or LRN, which is then has portability directed. Based on the underlying local routing number, there has been an exchange of data to a mutually acceptable point of interconnection. Okay. This is typically known as a session border controller. And then the originating network that terminates that traffic at that point of interconnection.
So it's your testimony that it would be technically feasible for Core and Verizon to interconnect using SBCs.
Oh, it's absolutely done. And Verizon, to my absolute knowledge, is in fact exchanging voice traffic with other service providers literally every second of the day.
And what is that knowledge based on?
Well, it's based on, frankly, Verizon's own filings with the United States Federal Communications Commission. They have indicated that they are exchanging traffic today and that they support the various mandates of the United States Congress and the Federal Communications Commission to authenticate the calls which are being exchanged.
Okay, thank you. Staying on page 3 of Mr. D'Amico's reply testimony.
Excuse me 1 second, please. This is a reporter.
Yes.
Mr. Clemens, would you mute your computer? Thank. It's not, there you go. Okay, thank you. I was having trouble hearing you. Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Shockey, staying on page 3 of Mr. D'Amico's reply testimony, moving down to lines 16 and 17, do you see that he testified, quote, IP interconnection agreements are typically nationwide, not state-specific. They are not filed with or approved by state commissions. They are done outside the section 251, 252 regulatory framework. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And do you see, following that on lines 18 through 21, Mr. D'Amico testified that a passage from your direct testimony appeared to agree with Mr. D'Amico's testimony.
What I
Do
would
you-
want to point out, however, is that I am not a lawyer. However, the sections 251, 252 of the U.S. Communications Act are not technically specific. Namely, they do not indicate whether or not interconnection agreements are either IP or, as I would say, TDM or time division multiplex basis, one way or the other. Though typically these agreements are outside the scope of Section 251, they certainly can be approved. And we are dealing with, of course, a very unique set of circumstances involving this particular case, which is both Core, as I point out in my testimony, both Core and Verizon are mandated by Congress to comply with the terms and conditions of the Trace Act. Because as we all know, and each and every one of us deal with every single day, the robocall call spoofing problem is a national menace. And this is in part one of the reasons by which Core's petition is so important to the citizens of Maryland and in fact the entire country. Because if you cannot negotiate an open agreement on IP interconnection, the very notion of the Trace Act is in fact lost in the network. So what we're dealing here is the protection of the citizens of the United States and citizens of Maryland that needs to be addressed in an interconnection agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Shockey. Do you have anything else to add to the record at this time?
No, sir.
Okay, great. The witness is available for cross-examination.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Clemens, Ms. Paiva?
I will do the cross-examination. I do have a few questions. All right. This is actually the first time I've cross-examined anybody over a WebEx or a Zoom, so apologize if I'm
worries.
looking all over the place.
Yeah, you're fine.
All right.
We can hear you.
Okay. So I think you kind of touched on this in your rejoinder. In your written testimony, on page 1, you say that you are the chairman of the board of the SIP forum. Verizon is also a member of the SIP forum, correct?
That is correct.
And
Chris Otway is a member of my board of directors.
yes, and Chris Otway is a Verizon attorney.
Yes.
And just generally, Verizon is an industry proponent of combating robocalls and heavily involved in those efforts at the FCC and with the industry, correct?
I am absolutely aware of that because I have read the entire docket on this, 1790, which is WC 1797. And I'm well aware of Mr. Otway's outstanding presentations before the FCC.
I will pass that on to him. He'll be happy to hear that. Okay. Well, I guess I first have a question, just going to your rejoinder that you just gave. So is there anything that would stop Core and Verizon from negotiating a commercial IP interconnection agreement outside of the purview of this commission?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Is there anything that would stop Verizon and Core from negotiating a commercial IP interconnection agreement? That, by that I mean one that's not regulated by this commission.
However, and there's nothing to stop them. However, both Verizon, AT&T, and Core Communication now have a legal obligation to support the Trace Act literally by June 30th of this year, or otherwise they will not be able to exchange traffic as dictated by the fourth report and order.
So I think you're saying they now actually have an incentive to negotiate a commercial agreement.
No, it's not an incentive. It is an absolute legal obligation to basically support the Trace Act and the Stir Shaken Protocol. I mean, there's no discussion of that at all. The Federal Communications rulings in both the second report and order on robocalls and the fourth report and order on robocalls indicate that there is an absolute and complete mandate to support Stir Shaken, or otherwise they will not be allowed to exchange traffic.
Okay, that actually goes to my next question. So in your testimony, your written testimony, I think in a couple of places, but one place is page 3, line 15, you talk about a concept called all IP interconnection, if you want to take a look at it. You'll let me know when you get there.
Oh, you're talking about line, page 3, 14, 15?
Yes, and the term all IP interconnection. So by that term, you mean a world where there is no TDM in the network, right? Everything is IP and everyone is interconnected in IP?
That is correct. And I have argued that position before the commission literally 2 weeks ago, that it is critically imperative to fight robocalls, that we basically move away from time division multiplexing and signaling system 7 to an all IP system, not only to support call authentication, but also be able to do track and trace to find and potentially prosecute, these folks that have been polluting our phone networks.
Okay, so but to get to that point, it requires the legacy technologies to be taken out of the network. For example, Verizon's copper lines.
There are mitigation strategies that some operators can ultimately use, which is obviously some operators, including AT&T, companies like Windstream and Frontier, have what are known as class 5 TDM switches in their network. Okay. They are not going to be removed anytime soon. However, there are ancillary technologies that they could install that would permit IP interconnection and still be able to authenticate that the call is in fact from their network one way or the other. These are called media gateways, signaling gateways. Interconnection would be done still via IP, but these are transitional technologies that many operators are looking at right now.
That doesn't sound like something that could happen sort of overnight or within the next couple of months, right? That sounds like a long-term technology upgrade.
That is true. We are down a relatively long path, to be able to restructure our voice communications network.
And to reach the all IP interconnection environment and for all customers to be able to benefit from stir shaken, would that require, like, for example, in the case of Verizon ILEC, would it require the retirement of all the copper lines?
Absolutely not. That's my point, is that you don't need to retire the copper. You can basically put intermediary technologies, between the sort of copper switches and the terminating providers that would provide the benefits of all IP without necessarily immediately retiring the class 5 switches that many operators do. And I live in Virginia, and I'm extremely aware of Verizon's efforts to retire the last mile copper. I mean, I've seen my own Section 214 proceedings, around here, by which Verizon is saying, well, you can go to FiOS, which I might add I'm using as we speak.
So am I.
Yeah, right. Which is an outstanding service, I might add. But the idea is that there are multiple operators that will not necessarily convert the last mile from copper to fiber or alternative technologies anytime soon.
So is that what you meant, like on page 10 of your written testimony, like around lines 10 to 13? You can, when you get there, let me know.
Okay.
Ms. Pava, could you speak up a little bit? You're very soft when you speak.
Oh, really? Maybe I should turn up my volume or something. Let me see.
Right. If you're looking at page, you're asking me to look at page 10, line 15 onward. And yes, this is exactly what I'm talking about here. That TDM interconnection kills stir shaken, period. Because the call authentication, what we call a passport, cannot be passed from the originating provider to the terminating provider. And in addition to that, the industry, including Verizon, I might add, has been very, very diligent in participating in what's known as the Traceback Consortium, which is assisting law enforcement and regulators in finding out where this offending traffic is coming from. And the advantage of IP versus TDM is that the signaling methodology, which what I pointed out in my written testimony, the SIP headers make it extremely easy to trace the origin of a call, even if it comes from a foreign source.
Okay, so going back to the page 10, lines 10 through 13, which I think is just above what you were discussing. So you're saying there that approximately 35% of calls in the United States are still on TDM interconnection, right?
Well, that there are nuances with that, and in ex parte filings that I've actually made with the FCC, is we think that there are a number of issues that the commission itself has to address. There are perverse incentives in the intercarrier compensation regime that actually incent some operators to drop the calls onto TDM, even if an all IP agreement is in place. Okay. And this is the 35% is in fact something of a guesstimate, because the data that we have from the FCC, as well as the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, which actually tracks some of this stuff, is very hard to parse.
Ms. Paiva, if I could just jump in. Mr. Shockey, you said the commission a couple times. Are you referring to the Maryland Public Service Commission or the Federal Communications Commission?
The Federal Communications Commission.
Right. That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page. Thank you. My apologies, Ms. Paiva.
That's exactly what I was going to ask him. But and then another question, another clarifying question
Sure.
on what you just said. When you talked about the perverse incentives to dump the traffic TDM, is that because it could be actually less expensive for the entity sending the traffic to do it that way?
Oh no, it's actually the reverse, which is the way intercarrier compensation is designed in the United States. There are issues of originating access charges. So the incentive to drop calls onto TDM is, in fact, they will make more money because of the way the Federal Communications Commission rules have currently been established and have not been amended.
All right, and just one more question. Have you, well, maybe two more questions. Have you done any studies of traffic coming from core to see if there are actually robocalls in that traffic?
No, ma'am.
And are you aware of any studies like that?
No, ma'am.
All right. That's all I have.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Ryan?
OPC has no questions, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Spivak, Ms. McErling?
Staff has no questions, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Vandenberg, any redirect, sir?
Very limited redirect, Your Honor. Mr. Shockey, do you recall that Ms. Paiva asked you about the possibility of a negotiated agreement for IP between Core and Verizon?
Yes.
And how would you handicap the probability of such an agreement? And what I mean is, what type of carrier does Verizon typically voluntarily negotiate an IP interconnection agreement with?
Well, yeah, Verizon is a very big company. Okay. So typically, what I am aware of is Verizon has negotiated IP interconnection agreements with its mobile peers, namely AT&T and T-Mobile, because of their national footprint. Given the size here, they also have, well, I have no direct knowledge of whether or not Verizon has a voice peering agreement. And this is what we're talking about here, not as data peering is one thing, namely what is connecting all of us literally as we speak, but a voice peering agreement. They have, it is my understanding that they do agreements typically with other like cable operators like Comcast, for instance, and others and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I would just want to object that this is speculation because he says he has no direct knowledge of whether Verizon has a voice peering agreement.
Right. Well, Mr. Vandenberg, why don't you try and answer your question again? I think it was something handicapping the possibility of a voluntarily negotiated ICA with Verizon and Core. Was that?
Yeah.
Okay.
If I could restate, Mr. Shockey,
Sure.
based on your experience, would Verizon voluntarily form an IP interconnection agreement with a carrier of Core's relative size?
Again, first of all, let's say IP interconnection agreement, because we're talking about two highly distinct issues. One is a voice interconnection agreement or an IP voice interconnection agreement versus a generalized IP data peering agreement. We're talking.
Yeah.
We're
So if we
talking.
could just stick with the voice agreement.
Yeah, the voice agreement again. Do they do that? I have no direct knowledge of peering agreements with firms of poor size.
And just
voice, we're talking 252. I mean, voice agreements versus a generalized IP data peering agreement, which is completely outside the scope of what we're talking about.
yeah.
Voice actually is different, and voice interconnection agreements are different from data interconnection agreements.
Okay. And just one more question. Mr. Shockey, are you aware that the FCC has encouraged carriers generally to enter into IP interconnection agreements for the exchange of voice traffic?
Yes, in fact, the U.S. Federal Communications Commission has even now an open docket on what they call technology transitions. I can't recall. I believe in my written testimony I pointed that out, which is the commission has clearly encouraged voice service providers to migrate to an all IP environment, though it has not, as of this date, set a sunset for TDM, time division multiplexing, and SS7. We may, in fact, see that forthcoming.
Thank you, Mr. Shockey. And Your Honor, I have no further questions for this witness.
Thank you, Mr. Vandenberg. How you doing, Mr. Shockey?
Yes, sir. Yes, Your Honor.
Are you doing okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. And if anybody needs to take a break, just let me know, raise your hand, because sometimes I have a tendency to get caught up in hearings. So what needs to happen for the robocall mitigation to be implemented just from an interconnection perspective? I mean, does Verizon have to do something to their network for this to be feasible?
No. Well, they are, Verizon is exchanging stir-shaken derived calls today. I mean, that's well understood.
Core.
And Verizon's
With Core, sir?
Pardon me?
Are they exchanging that traffic with Core?
I have no direct knowledge of that. No.
Okay. All right.
Because you've got the first, as I pointed out in my written testimony, the first thing is you've got to have an IP interconnection agreement in place. Otherwise, pardon me. Otherwise, Your Honor, the entire system fails. I mean, that's what we know at this particular point. So the first thing to do is to get a fair and equitable voice IP interconnection agreement put in place as soon as practically possible.
Okay. So in terms of now, Core wants to throw the robocall mitigation into the current interconnection agreement. Is that my understanding? Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Now, should it be in a completely separate agreement?
I'm not qualified to, I'm just a poor dumb engineer.
Okay.
I'm not qualified to answer that statement. Your Honor.
That's fine, sir. I appreciate that. And then I do have a couple questions about your testimony, and some of this stuff is just clarification for my own edification. On page 5, sir, you talk about how does stir, shake, and work. In the very last sentence on that page, it's line 23. I can wait till you're there, sir.
Look, all right. You say page 3, Your Honor?
Page 5, sir, line 23.
All right. Yes, sir.
It states for stir, shake, and to work, each carrier must hand off SIP header tokens.
Yes, sir.
What's a header token?
Okay. Well, if you'd like me to explain the SIP protocols, we would be here all day. But okay, what happens in an all IP call is it's basically signaling. So you have a SIP, what's known as an invite. It's a header. It's a piece of ASCII text that goes from the originating carrier to the terminating carrier. And it contains all the information necessary to establish a session. Okay, that's why it's called SIP. It's the session initiation protocol. Okay, so all of this information, including the stir, shake, and call authentication data, is inserted into this little file and then sent to the terminating carrier for both the call authentication as well as the ability to establish the session.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
You're quite welcome.
Right. Now, the FCC deadline, did you say that was June or July of 2021?
June 30th of this year.
Okay. On page 12 of your testimony, line 7, you had referenced July. I just wanted to make sure.
I believe it is June 30th.
Okay. So you want to change that, sir, to June, or for consistency purposes?
Yes, sir. I may have had a fat thumb day.
Okay, no problem, sir. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. And that's for people scoring at home, that's page 12, line 7, should be June to July to June.
And Your Honor, let me expand on that slightly.
Please.
By June 30th, every voice service provider in the United States must file with the FCC a robocall mitigation program. Okay. And even though the commission has not stood up that database yet, I mean, we're all waiting for it. Both Core and Verizon, and even such companies like Microsoft and Cisco, are required to file these plans with the FCC, or the FCC has stated unequivocally that they will not be allowed to interconnect.
Right. Okay, so you don't necessarily need the agreement between the parties. You need a plan, or are we talking? Or is that two separate things, sir?
Two separate things, sir.
Okay. So Verizon could, in theory, still file a plan without this mitigation, this robocall mitigation at issue in this case, and be in compliance. And I know that's maybe a bit of a legal question for you.
You're not the only person who's made that who's asked that question. Okay. So the questions that I've had as a consultant and as an expert in these technologies is, what is in fact an appropriate robocall mitigation program that is acceptable to the FCC? A lot of people don't necessarily have a good answer for that.
Okay.
I mean, I ask the Wireline Competition Bureau that quite often. What do you want us to do, guys?
So it sounds like it could be Verizon or Encore could comply with that mandate by either an interconnection agreement, their own plan, or something else. Is that?
That would be my understandings, Your
Okay,
Honor.
all right.
Yes.
Thank you.
But the requirement to comply is in
Right.
fact public. It's an act of Congress.
Gotcha. Understood. If I could get you to go to page 16, sir, of your testimony.
Okay. I need to pull it up. Yes, sir.
All right. On line 7, you have a sentence that says for TDM interconnection with Verizon, Core must convert all IP traffic to TDM on the egress side and from TDM to IP on the ingress, increasing cost with no apparent benefit to Core or its customers. So by that, are you suggesting that Verizon needs to do something on their side of the system to go from TDM to IP?
Without direct knowledge of Verizon's network, it would be hard for me to state.
Okay.
But again, generally, what we're talking about here is translating voice IP traffic to TDM and reversing it does establish cost to Core that they would not necessarily need to do.
Because Core is doing all the conversion.
Right.
Okay.
And that is actually, my point, which is to force Core to convert its traffic to TDM in order to interconnect with Verizon establishes costs on their network that they would not necessarily have to bear.
Does Verizon have to do any conversion on their side for Core traffic?
It would depend upon the structure of Verizon's network, and I have no knowledge of its IP interconnection points, whether or not it would be in Maryland or Verizon has extensive voice IP interconnection points of presence. Okay. In fact, I live about 10 minutes, I know, from one of them. Loudoun County, Virginia, has probably the largest single concentration of IP traffic exchanges anywhere on the face of planet Earth.
But that is lacking in Maryland? Is that?
I have no direct knowledge of that.
Okay.
There's
Okay.
probably some big, ugly building in Baltimore.
You're gonna have to be more specific than that.
I apologize, Your Honor. I don't have any specific.
That's fine, sir. That's fine.
Telco hotels are typically big, ugly buildings with.
Telco hotels. I haven't heard that term before. All right.
It's a telco hotel. Yeah.
All right. All right. I think that's all I have. Thank you very much, sir, but don't go away. Mr. Vanderberg, do you have any questions based on mine, sir?
Nothing further. Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Paiva?
No, I don't have anything else. Thank you.
You look like you're frozen, ma'am.
Uh-oh.
All right.
Can you hear me now?
We can't see you, but we can hear you. That's okay. Now
We don't have anything
everybody.
further. Oh, sorry.
Now can you hear me?
We don't have anything further, Your Honor.
Right.
Your Honor, can you hear me?
All right. I think that was Mr. Clemens. I'm getting
Yes.
everybody is. I got you, Mr. Clemens. But
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Your
Everybody
Honor.
else is going. Okay. You guys are coming back. All right. No questions from Verizon. Miss Ryan.
No questions,
I
Your
hope
Honor.
this is, all right. Thank you. Mr. Spivak?
No questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. That looks like a comfy chair, Mr. Spivak. All right. Okay. All right, Mr. Vanderberg.
Yes, Your Honor. Call to the stand, Mr. Mingo.
Okay,
Okay, Mr. Mingo.
okay. Mr. Mingo, you there? Can you hear us, Mr. Mingo?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Okay. I can hear you. I can't see you, but that's fine, as long as we can hear you. All right, if I could just swear you in, if you could raise your right hand for me. You swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
All right, thank you. If I could get you, please state your name and spell it, please, for the record.
My name is Brett Mingo, spelled B-R-T, Mingo, M-I-N-G-O.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Vanderberg?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Mingo. Do you have a copy before you of the direct testimony of Brett Mingo for Core Communications, Inc., dated January 22, 2021?
Yes, I do.
And is this your testimony?
Yes, it is.
And do you have any corrections to make to that testimony?
No, I do not.
And was this testimony prepared under your supervision and control?
Yes.
And if I were to ask you the same questions here today, would you provide the same answers?
Yes.
Your Honor, well, I guess I'll go to the reply testimony as well. And Mr. Mingo, do you have a copy before you of the reply testimony of Brett Mingo for Core Communications, Inc., dated February 19th, 2021?
Yes, I do.
And is this your testimony?
Yes, it is.
And do you have any corrections to make to that testimony?
No, I do not.
And was that testimony prepared under your supervision and control?
Yes.
And if I were to ask you the same questions here today, would you provide the same answers?
Yes.
Your Honor, Core would ask that you move Core Exhibits number 2 and 3 into the record, the direct and reply testimonies of Brett Mingo.
Okay, we'll mark Mr. Mingo's direct as Core Exhibit 2 for identification, and his rebuttal testimony is Exhibit Core, excuse me, Core Exhibit 3 for identification. Any objections?
No objection.
All right. All right, Core 2 and 3 are admitted.
And Your Honor, at this time, I would like to ask the witness just one question on rejoinder.
Any rejoinder, Mr. Vandenberg?
Yeah, just one question, please.
Sure.
Mr. Mingo, earlier, Mr. Shockey testified that in his view, it would be technically feasible for Core and Verizon to interconnect at a session border controller, or SBC. And do you agree with that assessment?
Absolutely, yes.
And are you aware of any SBCs specifically located in Maryland where Core and Verizon could accomplish an IP interconnection?
Yes. Verizon has 2
Mr.
packet
Vandenberg,
switches.
you broke up there a little bit. Can you restate your question, please?
Yes. Mr. Mingo, are you aware of any specific SBCs?
Mr. Vandenberg?
Yeah, you can't hear me?
We've got an echo.
Sir?
Richard Shockey's got
You're
his.
kind of,
There it goes.
I just muted him. So, Mr. Vandenberg, if I could get you to start over, please. I apologize, sir.
No worries. Okay, so Mr. Mingo, earlier Mr. Shockey testified that it would be technically feasible for Core and Verizon to interconnect at a session border controller, or SBC. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes, I do.
And do you agree with that assessment?
Yes.
And are you aware of any specific session border controllers or SBCs located in Maryland where Core and Verizon could interconnect using IP?
I am aware that Core and Verizon are directly connecting to 2 packet switches on Verizon's network in Maryland, the Annapolis packet switch and the Gaithersburg packet switch. We are forced to connect over TDM, but because it's a packet switch, there is nothing stopping us from connecting to those switches over IP. They assuredly have additional SBCs, but since we've never been offered a commercial agreement and never have had a chance to connect over IP, I can only know about the specific packet switches that I talked about. But certainly we could connect over IP. Certainly they have an SBC function. Certainly they connect to tandems. We can certainly do this right now.
Thank you, Mr. Mingo. And Your Honor, that was my only question on rejoinder. So witness is available for cross.
I have cross, but first, can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay, I'm sorry, I was muted. Yeah, we can.
Hear you, but
Go ahead,
speak up
ma'am.
again.
Well, say that again?
Say we hear you, but speak up again, please.
Okay. And let me know if, like, you lose the connection or you can't hear me at some point. Okay, good morning, Mr. Mingo.
good morning.
I have a few questions, and actually not about the IP interconnection issue. These are about the other issues that were in your testimony. So I guess my first set of questions is really about the like the kind of traffic that would be sent to Verizon over the various types of trunks we've been discussing. But to set the stage, so in your testimony, right on page 1, you say that, this is line 6 through 8, you say that Core provides facility-based local exchange and voice over internet protocol services in Maryland, Pennsylvania, and other states along the Atlantic seaboard nationwide. So my question is, what other states are you currently offering facilities-based local exchange service besides Pennsylvania and Maryland?
The family of companies under Cortel have are working on a national footprint as we speak. Core Communications in particular, and specifically, is Maryland and Pennsylvania.
Okay. So Core Communications, what services does it offer in Maryland?
We offer wholesale services to classes of carriers, other carriers, including voice over IP carriers, iPaaS, CLECs, and the sort. So an array of switching services.
So your customers are all other telecommunications carriers?
And yes, and some text messages customers as well.
Do you say text message customers?
Yes.
So how does that service work, the text message service?
Well,
Please speak up, please.
I'm sorry. Basically, we assign DIDs to customers who use those numbers for SMS services. We aren't actually directly involved in the SMS message flow, so I can't speak to what they're doing. And I can't. I mean, I do happen to know that whole universe is becoming chaotic right now. But that's another story.
And DID stands for direct inward dial, correct?
Telephone numbers in common vernacular.
Yep. Right. So you have the telephone numbers. You are giving these customers the right to use your telephone numbers.
Right. We handle the voice switching. They handle the SMS switching.
Okay. So does Core have any retail customers located in Maryland?
I mean, in the sense that we provide tariff services and untariff and I mean, this is where my
Mr. Mingo, could you start over, please? You were breaking up there, please.
yeah, I'm on an island, so the fiber optic sometimes split. So in
Mr. Mingo, we're only getting bits and pieces of your response, sir.
okay, when the internet gets
Mr.
trouble
Mingo?
here, yes, hold on. Give it a minute, give it a few seconds because the internet does fade sometimes.
Okay.
I'm in
No
Barbados.
problem, sir. No, you're not. We've got a couple people with
So
slow connections. Did you say you're in Barbados?
correct.
We should have had the hearing there.
It's lovely.
Well, good. I hope you're enjoying yourself. Yeah, if we could, I don't know how we could justify that, but if you could just start over with your response to Ms. Paiva's question, I would appreciate it, sir.
From an economic sense, we do not have end user customers. From a regulatory sense, my understanding is they are end users for our telecommunications services. So in which context do you mean? I mean, if you're just trying to say we don't sell directly to Citibank, that the answer is yes.
Well, I guess let me break it down. So in an economic sense, you don't have any retail customers that are paying for telephone service, right? Is that what you meant?
Correct.
Okay. Do you have any customers in Maryland who could physically pick up the phone and dial a local voice call?
My customers do over core numbers, yes.
Is that the direct inward dial that you were referring to?
Yes, we carry voice communications to customers in Maryland, but we don't do so directly.
Okay, I see. So going back to the traffic that you would send to Verizon through this interconnection agreement, would you say then that the majority of it is actually originated by your wholesale customers that are other telecom carriers?
Yes.
Okay, and we, so still going to the interconnection with Verizon, we talked, or in the testimony, I guess, you and Mr. D'Amico talked about the different types of trunks that you could order under this agreement. And you said on page 9 of your testimony that basically Core would not need access toll connecting trunks, that you have a competitive alternative for that service, correct?
That is correct.
So your anticipation is that anything that you would send to Verizon under this interconnection agreement, you would be sending over the local interconnection trunks.
I would say it differently and I believe more accurately, which is I would be exchanging 251B5 traffic over 251C2 trunks.
And the 251C2 trunks are what is termed in the testimony local interconnection trunks.
Yes, that's the language you like to use, local interconnection trunks.
All right. Okay. So would you be planning to send traffic that's destined to an inter-exchange carrier over these 251C2 trunks?
Traffic from our network to an IXC.
Yeah.
My initial instinct is to say absolutely not, but give me a minute to think if there's any hypothetical case that I can imagine off where that might happen. No, I can't say I can think of any reason why we would send any calls to an IXC over those trunks.
Okay. And what about I'm not sure, would you be receiving calls from IXCs at all?
Mr. Maker, what was the Ms. Paiva?
Yes, go ahead.
Ms. Paiva or Mr. Mingo, can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Sir.
Mr. Mingo?
Yes, sir.
What was the last part of that answer that you gave, that you couldn't foresee a situation where Core would send something to IXC? I just couldn't make out all of that, sir.
I can't imagine a scenario where we would be sending calls to an IXC over local interconnection trunks, in her words, 252C2 interconnection trunks. I can't imagine a scenario, no.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, got it. And
Thank you, sir.
I don't remember if we stated it for the record, but IXC is inter-exchange carrier, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and my next question was the reverse.
I think we lost you, Ms. Pot.
uh,
All right,
Can you hear me now?
Ms. Paiva, Doug, are you, well, I'm getting bits and pieces. Doug, did you get that question or is it just me?
She's speaking very softly. She's
Doug?
get closer to the computer and speak louder, and then Ms. Paiva, I think we'll hear you clearly then. I know it's sometimes tough to do. I'm sorry about that.
I am right next to the computer, so can you hear me?
That's much better. Thank you very much.
Your Honor, can you hear me?
We can, yes. We just missed we were only getting bits and pieces of your question.
Okay, Mr. Mingo, I was going to ask you the reverse of the last question, right? The last question I asked you whether you would send any traffic to IXCs over the local interconnection trunks. So then my next question is, would you be anticipating that you would receive any traffic from IXCs over the local interconnection trunks?
I know for a fact we have been receiving from you guys IXC traffic over those groups for some time, but that is for your switches to decide, not mine. Once I get the call, I try to complete the call. So why you let IXCs use a backdoor is beyond me, but we have been seeing that traffic for years. You refuse to, often you refuse to identify it, and often you refuse to you refuse to pay for it. In fact, you refuse to pay for all that traffic for time and material. So yes, we do see traffic over these groups from IXCs from you.
So I guess you're saying traffic exchange with IXCs should not be going over these groups either way, correct?
No, I just think we should have consistent rules for what happens when it does, i.e. core language for core should be the Verizon.
Okay, sorry, I was just skipping over some of this because I think you covered it. So in your testimony, your reply testimony, at the bottom of page 4, there's a question. The question is being asked of you. Do you agree with Mr. D'Amico that CORE has made clear that its intent is to deliver non-core originated traffic to Verizon and to require Verizon to switch the traffic and deliver it to another third party, but avoid any obligation to compensate Verizon for its tandem transit service? And your answer is no. I don't know if you want to look at that or if you remember that part of the testimony.
Which page are you referring to?
It was at the bottom of page 4 was the question, and I believe your answer actually carried over to the next page.
Okay, I'm pulling it up. Right. We believe that we should have an agreement where both sides compensate each other for the same thing. But what is happening is you are not compensating us and you're asking us to compensate you, and we are asking for a level playing field.
Okay, well, I actually wanted to ask you what you meant by, I mean, maybe you're explaining this, but you said no. Does that mean you are not going to send any non-core originated traffic destined to third parties to Verizon? Or you are going to send that?
It depends on the agreement we end up with, but this agreement's been 15 years in the making, so I don't know. I mean, right now, it's not our intent to not pay you for services rendered, but of course you are not paying us for services rendered. So I just want to be in the same boat.
Yeah, I guess I was asking about, like, if you got the agreement the way you want it to be. So sorry if that wasn't clear. would you intend to be sending non-core originated traffic destined to third parties to Verizon Maryland?
If you bill us at Telric, right, we will definitely send traffic to you. We don't, the question that, the way D'Amico's question read to me was, do we intend to do it without compensation? And the answer is no, we really want agreement, both sides pay each other. But the problem really is you guys aren't paying us for this kind of traffic. So why should we pay you? So it's really a question of fairness, not a question of whether we send a traffic. Of course, our business is switching. If we can do it in a reliable and a reliable way that provides value, then we will do so. We don't intend to not pay you, for tandem rate, for transit rates. But what you're doing is not paying us. And so to the extent that you want to do that, then we should also not pay you. It's a term issue. It's not a question of commerce. It's the terms.
Now, so I guess for the transit, at least from Verizon's perspective, where we want to charge for the traffic would be going, you'd be sending it to Verizon Maryland, but it would really be destined to another CLEC or wireless provider, a third party. Are you saying that Core does the same thing? Verizon can send Core traffic and Core would deliver it to another CLEC or a wireless carrier?
Yes, you're doing that now.
Your Honor, when they go through these acronyms, I need to have some names with it because I don't have the paperwork that you all have there. So first off, what is CORE?
Sure.
Give me the full name. Thank you.
Understood.
It's Core Communications, Inc.
It's like Apple Core, CORE.
Correct.
Yeah, and Mr. Mingo, to the extent you're using acronyms, if you could spell it out at least the first time you use it, I know the court reporter would be appreciative.
I'll do my best, but it is a language that I've learned, so I will. Slowing it down I won't be perfect at it. Call me out.
Yes, and I'm in the same boat. We kind of assume people know these things. One acronym.
No problem, sir. Thank you.
One that I know we just used was CLEC. That stands for Competitive Local Exchange Carrier, correct?
Correct.
Right. And Core is a CLEC, correct?
Correct.
But there are many others.
Correct.
And Ms. Pive, if I could jump in, I think IXC was also another one used.
Yes. What is IXC, Mr. Mingo?
An inter-exchange carrier.
And what is an inter-exchange carrier, and how does that differ from a CLEC?
An inter-exchange carrier is the telephony version of the internet. It's voice, but the telephony vision. I'm largely thinking in terms now that an IXC is really a dated concept, because, for example, we're using the internet right now. We're not having this over a conference call over an IXC, but if we were all dialing into a single phone number, and 800 number, we'd be using an IXC. So,
and I guess back in the day, before there was so much internet conversation, the importance of an IXC was that it was able to take traffic across state boundaries, and the local, like Verizon Maryland, would not be able to do that. Is that correct?
I mean, if we go back a really long time, I would say that's true. I'm not sure it ceased to be true, but I do know that Verizon did buy a long distance company, over 15 years ago. So it's been a while since Verizon hasn't been able to cross state lines.
Right. Well, Verizon has its own IXC affiliates. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Oops, I don't know. We may have lost Mr. Mingo. Are you still there, Mr. Mingo?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. We lost your picture for a minute, or I did.
They look like,
Okay.
Does the use the Shark My fiber optic cable work?
I didn't get everything you just said.
One of the things I've come to learn living here in Barbados is waves do disrupt the fiber optic sometimes.
Okay. I'm just going to ask you, finish up here with a couple of questions about the IP interconnection issue. So in your testimony, your direct testimony, at page 11, lines 18 through 19, you say that since roughly 2005, CORE has interconnected with dozens of carriers using IP instead of TDM, including the use of public and private IP networks. Do you remember that, or do you want to take a look at that?
Please give me acronym names.
Oh. Well, IP is Internet Protocol. What's TDM? What's TDM? Time division multiplexing? Anyway, do you remember that testimony?
Yes.
So what carriers are you referring to?
Oh, we've got dozens. I think maybe a useful example could be though is that we use access tandems aside from we used access tandems that are not Verizon. Those three in our network right now are Peerless, Inteliquent, and Wide Voice. All of them do over IP because it's better and more efficient. And we are prepared to handle stir-shaken tokens for all of our access traffic as soon as every carrier is ready to send them.
And just for the record, when you say access traffic, could you explain what that is?
A dated concept. It's we put in the LURG an access tandem route that IXCs, if they still are doing it LURG based, that they would default route to the access tandem in the switch homing arrangement or SHA. So it's really a backwards looking support mechanism for people who still insist on looking at the world from 1995 era. But those carriers still do that. We'll go to Peerless or Wide Voice or Inteliquent, depending on which switch we put in the SHA, and then route to us over IP. We also offer to the world via our 1080 affiliate what's called an LCR, or least cost routing deck. And most of our traffic to our numbers arrives via the LCR decks rather than the access tandem for the local groups.
Okay, before I forget, I'm sure that the court reporter wants to know what's the LURG, what it stands for.
The local exchange routing guide.
All right. And the least cost routing deck, is that, well, I guess you could tell me, but is that a way for the customers to find the least expensive way to route the traffic through various carriers?
Right, there exists a very vibrant wholesale market for routes. We announce our blocks and our LRNs via LCRs to carriers we contract with at a certain rate, and most networks pick up that traffic by their trading partners. So, increasingly, the world does not use TDM to interchange traffic. We indirectly get traffic from lots of carriers. We get from the world, the world's global telephone network. We also get directly calls over the LCR. So, and those are all IP interconnections, which means Stir Shaken's going to work on them as soon as we're all ready, which is coming fast.
Going back to the IP interconnection agreements, do you have any agreements with incumbent local exchange carriers?
Any IP agreements?
Yes.
Core, I mean, it's almost circular logic. I mean, you are the incumbent local exchange carrier in Maryland, and the answer is no, and we want one.
I get, yeah.
So, I mean, here we are. And to the extent that we could do this voluntarily, what's the problem with agreeing to it in this agreement that we're going to do it?
Any of these, I know you say you don't have any agreements with the ILECs, but are any of your IP interconnection agreements filed with the state commissions under the Section 251, 252 process?
I don't believe so, and I don't believe they're relevant because again, I do realize that we also have an ICA with CenturyLink in Pennsylvania. There are much smaller ILEC we interconnect with, but those are the only two that would be 251 oriented, and we're trying to get an IP interconnection right now with you in a 251 agreement and file at the commission. That is the point of this process.
Just one last question. I'm sorry to jump around, but before when you were talking about Peerless, for example, that you could send your traffic to Peerless in IP using the stir shaken protocols, then Peerless could have an IP interconnection agreement with ILECs, CLECs, and deliver that traffic for you, correct?
Right, but why I want to go directly to the carriers to the extent possible. So yes, I mean, Peerless could create a second point of failure. Peerless could, in fact, mark up the costs. Yes, you're right. I could, if I really, if we really went down the possibility, I could, in fact, buy a phone call retail too, but that's not what I want to do.
All right. I don't have any more questions for you, Mr. Mingo. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Ryan.
No questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Staff, Ms. McErling, Mr. Spivak.
No questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Mr. Vandenberg, any redirect, sir?
No redirect, Your Honor.
All right, very good. How's it going, Mr. Mingo?
Good. How are you?
I'm well. Learning a lot here. Assurance of payment. You indicate that CORE has consistently argued that this was beyond the scope of this proceeding because CORE never agreed to negotiate that. Is that correct, sir?
Correct.
Now, the commission has ruled in 2019 in Verizon's favor on that particular issue, and I understand CORE has asked for reconsideration of that decision. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is there anything that has changed since that ruling till today on this particular issue?
I mean, you know, maybe, and then let you decide whether this particular anecdote is relevant from your point of view. But we are in a contested proceeding in Chapter 11, and Verizon is trying to use is simultaneously self-helping and paying us for services rendered to them, while using a judgment or a decision to try to liquidate their company. And so my concern is an assurance of payment that's strenuous would in fact put them in another position where they could delay on money.
You're not picking this up.
You're breaking up a bit there towards the end, sir.
Okay.
If I can get you to restate maybe the last half of that, sir.
Right. I mean, my experience in 20 years of working with Verizon is anytime they can flip the switch and knock us off the network, they will do so. And unless we can have our side of the issues heard, we are very reluctant to enter into an insurance of payment mechanism, which would be another vehicle for them to flip the switch and knock us off the network.
All right, thank you, sir. And I don't know if you have it available, the table of open issues in parties alternative language. Is that something you have available, sir?
That was the third thing I pulled up this morning getting ready for this call. So let's.
Okay. And I guess just so the record's clear, I'd like to make this a bench exhibit unless there's some strenuous objection from the parties. All right, hearing none, we're going to make the table of open issues and parties alternative language that was filed, I believe, on November 13th, 2020 as bench exhibit 1. Are you there, sir?
Yes, I am.
I was just wondering, assurance of payment. 6.4, they both look either the same or exactly the same. I was just wondering if I was missing something in that particular provision.
It's been a while since I've thought about this issue under a microscope, to be perfectly honest.
Okay.
I mean, we do very strenuously. That this shouldn't at all be in the agreement because of because we never waived the right. We didn't waive the right, saying the position that we weren't negotiating this. So, but I mean, when I did think about this, there was something very material why we wanted our, which I just couldn't
All right. Thank you, sir. Moving on to VoIP PSTN traffic, and for Doug, that's voice over internet protocol. And I'm going to ask you to fill in the rest for me, Mr. Mingo. What's a PSTN?
PSTN is Public Switch Telephone Network.
Thank you. Did you get that, Doug?
I did, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Now this is an issue that Verizon claims was not part of the negotiation, and I'm guessing it's probably because when this thing started back in 2004, this VoIP PSTN wasn't an issue back then. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I guess my question is, if it wasn't part of the negotiation, why should we be considering it now?
Well, this agreement, this arbitration process is now 15 years old.
Sure.
The world has moved on, while so locking this agreement into a world of 15 years would just bring us to a new arbitration as soon as possible. We have to address modern issues.
All right. Okay. And that's fair. That's what I thought was going to be the issue. I just wanted to make sure I was on the same page. All right. Okay. The point of interconnection, and Mr. D'Amico's direct. He claims that each party bears the responsibility for its own outbound traffic. Why is he incorrect on that?
Well, he's in 2011, a decade ago, FCC ordered the transition's been over for many, many years. Calling party pays is no longer a model under the FCC's interconnection rules.
All right. And so in terms of further transport, so once you get it to the interconnection point, it's, so of course, sending a call to Verizon, once you get to that interconnection point, core is done. And is that correct? Your responsibilities?
And vice versa. I mean, one thing to historically bear in mind is it used to be that the vast majority of traffic the parties exchange were calls from Verizon to us. They successfully got the terms changed. They didn't have to pay us, right? Now it's a bit more bidirectional, but this is a world of Verizon before.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. Putting him up.
You're breaking up, sir. If I could get you to finish up restate that last part, please, sir.
This bill and keep environment is one that Verizon strenuously argued for and used it as a rationale to no longer pay even our costs for us to receive traffic. It's, we're living in a world not of our own making, but just want the terms to be equal both directions.
Understood, sir. Sir, if I could get you to go back to the issue list, if you still have it in front of you.
Yes. Yes, sir.
All right. On page 3, on POI, that's point of interconnection, Doug, and trunk types.
I have it in front of me.
All right. It looks like the only difference in 2.1, and I apologize if this might be a little tedious. I just want to make sure I'm going through and trying to hit everything. It looks like the only difference is Verizon has multiple points of interconnection in the heading, and then they have points of interconnection down a little bit further, whereas Core has interconnections as being plural. Is that's really the only? I didn't know if that was a distinction without a difference.
Yeah, I think that is a scene without a difference. I mean, at the end of the day, they will for one point in a lot of, which really is absurdly generous at this in 2021. We think it's unnecessarily restrictive, but we certainly shouldn't be more restrictive than that. At the end of the day, if we're doing an IP, well, it's almost like the internet works, and we can talk to anywhere in the internet right now. And so why are we putting why don't we have 2 points for the entire country? And so to further restrict it to be to multiple points in a lot, that's 1995, man.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. Jumping ahead to the next page on section 2.1.2.
Okay.
You there, sir? It looks like
yes.
The only difference is probably the last line. Verizon states subtended by the terminating Verizon end office, and Core's says subtended by a terminating end office. What's the difference there, sir?
So it's tandems connect multiple end office switches. The difference being is they still have multiple tandems in a LATA, and we don't care about their network, the network architecture, but it should be sufficient for us to hand the call to them at any point in the LATA. And what they're trying to do in that language is make it multiple points in a LATA. Of course, in an IP interconnection, all of this we would be just connecting at 1 or 2 SBCs in the entire country. But this is again, they're trying to restrict us to 1995 architecture.
And what does LATA stand for, sir?
I might not be 100% correct in this one. Local area and yeah.
Your Honor, if I may.
Local area and transport area? Local access and transport area.
Access and transport.
All right,
there.
good. Page 6 of your testimony. So sorry about that. All right, thank you, sir. Moving ahead, the next paragraph down, sir, 2.1.3. looks like at least the first difference is there's Verizon has using Verizon's facilities, and then Court has by leasing Verizon's facilities. What's the difference in your mind between using and leasing?
I think we just wanted to be a little more precise. I mean, what our overarching goal here is to have the services itemized on and priced in this agreement, because ambiguity is Verizon's friend, not ours. We're just trying to know that when we're ordering X, we're giving X. So saying leasing ordering, that's what we're trying to do here.
Okay. And then you reference a little further down, you reference section A2 of Appendix A to the pricing attachment. Now, which pricing attachment are you referring to, sir?
Okay, the pricing attachment for the services in this agreement. In our 20-year experience with Verizon, they find any ambiguity to charge us under tariff. And those aren't priced very well. So we are trying to say it's in this agreement, these rates.
Understood. And maybe this is a better question for maybe Mr. Vanderberg or Ms. Paiva. The document he's talking about, the pricing attachment, Appendix A, is that in the doc? I'm assuming that's in the docket somewhere. I just want to make sure I know where it is and that it's in the record.
Yes, Your Honor, Core proposed a specific rates for interconnection facilities. I believe that's the document referred to here. I believe it's attached to testimony. Let me.
Was it Mr. Mingo's testimony?
Yes, Mr. Mingo's testimony, tab F.
Tab F, okay. All right.
Those are the specific rates that are referred to in this provision.
All right. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. I appreciate you confirming. I know this case, as you said, this case has been going on for a while. All right, in your direct, sir, on page 8, you're proposing to use the 2004 UNE transport rates, and UNE stands for
Unbundled network elements.
okay. But Verizon claims the most recent UNE transport rates are from 2005. Why isn't it appropriate to use those rates, sir?
I'm not sure. I mean, I would say that if we looked at technology costs in 2021, it would be a lot cheaper than those rates also.
Okay.
But I'm suggesting you go off and start a rate making proceeding. I don't want that on you guys.
No, I'm gonna sustain the objection on that one. Let's just get through this one first. See if we can wrap this case up. All right, the trunk tights. Let's see. All right. On page 5, trunk types are 2.2.1. In interconnecting their networks pursuant to this attachment. Now, what attachment are you referring to there, sir?
This is page 5 of my direct.
No, I'm sorry, sir. This is the issue list. My apologies.
Okay.
And again, I just want to clarify for the record or attempt to clarify.
I would have to, this is an issue in an attachment. I'm not, and this issue we plug directly in the attachment. So I'm not sure from here where that is in the whole body of the ICA. Okay. But I think in context, it would be clear because it's in an attachment itself.
Okay. Just, well, I guess when the parties brief that, if you could just be explicit as possible, if you're referring to attachments that aren't necessarily within the testimony, I would be grateful. On page 9, sir, of your direct, you state that very first line, your understanding of the laws that FCC rules have always permitted interconnection trunks to carry any type of traffic. Is there any specific rule that you're aware of, sir, or is that just kind of your general knowledge?
Well, I mean, it's been, I want to say 18, 19 years since the FCC described 251b5 traffic as being all telecommunications. I mean, a lot of these word parsing games that are being played, it's been our position that everything fits under 251b5, and there you go. I mean, I mean, there have been a long path along the way where exchange access, which has been defined as a different category. My understanding is exchange access has always been included under 251b5, going back to 1996. It was part of the original first report and order. So Verizon keeps trying to play this word parsing thing to wrap exchange access and access toll connecting trunks into the tariff world. But exchange access has always been part of 251b5, and all we're asking for is to be able to carry under 252c2 interconnection trunks 251b5 traffic.
I didn't get those numbers, Your Honor. 252 is all I heard.
251b5 is one, and the other one is 252c2.
Thank you. It sounds better when you lean in closer.
Okay.
All right. Sir, if I could get you to go back to the issue list on page 5. And I'm looking at 2.2.1.2.
Yep.
All right. It looks like if you go down about maybe 3/4 of the way, it looks like the big difference here is in cores. It states where core elects to subtend a Verizon access tandem, but then in your direct testimony, you say that's not going to happen.
That is true. Can't imagine you would ever go back to a Verizon access tandem.
Okay, so is that okay? And just so I'm clear, when you say subtend, what exactly does that mean, sir?
So as I was explaining earlier, on the peerless and wide voice and telequin arrangements, when you put in the LURG, an access tandem, there's a column. Your switch is a row. The access tandem is a column. In a Verizon tandem, that would be where subtend. Now, there may be still some LURG records out there where we have a Verizon access tandem in it. So the point of, but the reality is, in those situations, we ported all those numbers in that block away from to a LRN that subtends a competitive carrier's tandem. So even if there's a record out there point to this say are not in fact true, I have no access to connecting trunks. That calls will not complete over the Verizon access tandems, and I think the only reason why Verizon still likes this language in the agreement at all is so that way they can confuse people later and charge us access rate for them. But I'm trying to make it as clear as possible that we are not exchanging access traffic with Verizon over access toll connecting trunks.
Okay.
Can you hold on one moment? I think you use the word LIRG, L-I-R-G, and I think that may be another one of those acronyms that you might want to.
Local exchange routing guide. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Spivak. All right. All right. 2 point. Juggling all these papers here. On same issue list, sir. 2.2.4. Verizon did not have language on that because they thought it was inappropriate, and I believe Mr. D'Amico called it archaic. Do you recall that, sir?
Give me a second.
Sure. Or no, I'm sorry. I think it was relic was the term.
I mean, to be fair, if we go to an IP interconnection, this is all moot. But you know, we don't want to be in a situation where certain tandems we can't get to. So I think we're just trying to expand to a ubiquitous coverage situation. But if they will agree to they will route all calls to everywhere in the lotto over one tandem, we'll be very happy with that.
All right. Thank you, sir. If I could get you, do you have your reply testimony, sir?
Yes, sir.
And I apologize for jumping around. Same topic. If you could go to page 4.
Okay.
On line 13, it states the only difference between that core will accept Verizon's traffic at a potentially separate point of core's choosing. And my question was, why would core get to choose where it accepts Verizon's traffic? Wouldn't it be up to Verizon to determine where it wants to interconnect with your system, sir?
I think that these are sort of older rules, but at the end of the day, we are happy with them. We are happy with them exchanging traffic at one point in our network. We don't want to be in a situation where they say we have to build out to some place, and so typically the receiving party gets to choose where they receive traffic. Again, all of this is moved with IP interconnection.
Sure. So Verizon would, in theory, get to choose where it accepts your traffic?
That's what they have done historically, yes.
Okay. And that's in this is one of the situations where you just want, kind of what's good for the goose is good for the gander. You just want the same rules. Is that fair?
Correct. That's correct.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right. If I could get you to go back to your the issues list, sir, on page 6, interconnection intervals.
This is my reply or
the issues list, sir?
The issues list. Okay.
Yes, sir.
I'm here.
All right. On page 6, 4.2. Aside from there's some minor, well, actually, no, it looks like the only issue here is, or the only difference is with core on section B. You've got technically feasible point of interconnection on core's network to be established, whereas Verizon does not have that technically feasible language. Is that just more of a, you're trying to be more specific, sir?
Correct. We're just trying to be more specific.
Okay. Jump into 4.4, sir, on the next page. And Core has proposed a 30-day period for, let me see. If Core requests interconnection over existing dedicated facilities in a new LATA, Verizon shall deliver the requested trunks within 30 days. And does your proposal apply only to existing facilities?
Yes.
Okay. It seems like I understood Verizon's testimony to mean like they're building new facilities. Is that not the case, sir?
That's not the case. The whole point with the existing dedicated facilities.
Okay. And it's the same with, I think it's, was it Loop as well?
Right.
Yeah, existing loop and existing dedicated be 30 days for both because they're both actually existing.
Existing, correct.
All right. There's a term in here also a little further up. It says waiver of any parity requirement. What's a parity requirement, sir?
At this point, I don't recall what parity.
Okay. That's just kind of a gee whiz for myself. So not a huge problem. Tandem transit traffic. Does this type of traffic fall under the premise you indicated earlier where the responsible carrier is only responsible, or the delivering carrier, so Core delivering to Core, is only responsible to up to the interconnection point?
Correct.
And then it would be Verizon. Okay, so it's the same issue?
Yeah, yes. And it's really helpful to think of when, I mean, the FCC sort of tandem switching to Verizon is still billing heat. There's a special carve out for third-party traffic that, ideally the world goes to full IP interconnection and there's no tandems get obviated sooner rather than later. But to the extent that a small CLEC or small third party or somebody else still sometimes Verizon's traffic either locally or access wide.
So in situations where there's a third party and Core's the middleman, so to speak, and sending that traffic to Verizon, Verizon raised the question of how Verizon can differentiate between traffic that originates on Core's system versus third party traffic. How does that work, sir?
Well, ideally we would be exchanging stir shaken tokens over IP, and that way we'd have full accountability back to the source. And I think in the world of robocalls, I think we need to get to that very, very, very soon. Now, as far as here, I'm not sure. Well, if we're in the middle, then we are sending. Then it really, I don't think it really matters. At the end of the day, exchange access traffic, whether it's ours or somebody else's, is all permissible on these groups. So it doesn't matter from a financial point of view. It doesn't matter from a trunk group point of view. And the best world really would be stir shaken, where we have full accountability packets, and therefore we can all work on the great project of knocking the robocallers off the network.
Okay, so the tandem transit traffic is kind of works in conjunction with the stir shaken in your mind, sir? Or are we talking two different things?
I mean, I think to the extent that the commission decides to not do IP, if the commission decides not require Verizon to IP interconnect with us, then we are left with the tandem world. And so, I am saying that the world would be a better place if Verizon and ILEC would connect via IP for stir shaken reasons. So on one hand, I'm making a moot argument. I'm making an argument for that. On the other hand, for the world where that doesn't happen, in that case, in the case where it doesn't happen, then we need to then we're back into unaccounted for traffic. But from a relationship with a Verizon point of view, with us Verizon, the traffic exchange access traffic doesn't matter whether it's us, our numbers, or somebody else's traffic originated. It's still bill and keep. It's still over the same trunk group. What's the difference?
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. In 10.5, sir, of the final issue list on page 9, you there, sir?
Yes, sir.
All right. It looks like the main difference here is Verizon states Core shall pay Verizon for transit service that Core delivers to Verizon, whereas Core's has Core shall pay Verizon for transit service that Core originates. So I mean, I know what the difference is, but between delivering and originating. So yours essentially, I think Verizon's point is yours cuts out third-party traffic. And just why is that appropriate to cut that out in this scenario?
All right. So in we've had other cases with Verizon. Pennsylvania proceeding comes to mind where Verizon has steadfastly refused to pay us for traffic that did not originate on our network. And so this language is another one of those what's good for the goose, good for the ganders situation. I mean, we're working with what Verizon has. Verizon can take traffic from anyone, pass it on to us, and then insist that it wasn't theirs. They don't have to tell us whose it was, and not pay us for it. This is us asking for the same situation.
Okay, and then by Verizon not telling Core where the traffic is from, you couldn't go back to the third party and bill them, is that?
Well, I mean, from an accountability point of view, we don't know the chain of custody before it reaches us.
Sure.
We don't know if there's a wholesale IXC in the middle. We don't know so the phone number can't tell us who is responsible. We don't know what relationship Verizon has. You know, how we can't trace back. Again, this is an argument for stir shaken. We can't do that over TDM.
Okay. Just give me 1 second, please, sir. If I could get you to turn to page 10 of the issues list, sir. You there, sir?
Yes.
Core's position is that footnote 3 should be excluded because it's not consistent with the order. I was just wondering if you recall what order that refers to.
I'm not sure which order. I'm guessing that it's one of the previous orders in this case from Maryland.
Okay. All right.
I'm pretty sure that's it now.
Sure. Here, general question for you. Is it typical to have prices set forth in the interconnection agreements?
Yes. Yes. It's amazing. It's amazing how often Verizon says that those numbers do not apply. They always bill under tariff, and we're trying to specifically tie services to the ICA with a rate in the ICA as tightly as possible.
All right.
What's the ICA?
Interconnection agreement.
All right. Mr. Mingo, I think that's all I have. I appreciate your time and your patience with me. Mr. Vanderberg, do you have any redirects, sir? All right, he's
I do
he's
not,
shaking
Your
his.
Honor. I do
Okay,
not.
thank you. Ms. Paiva?
No, I don't have anything.
Ms. Ryan?
No questions, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Spivak?
No questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much. All right, it's 12 o'clock. Why don't we I'll leave it up to the parties. You guys want to take a lunch break or you just want to take kind of a short break and come back and finish up with Verizon? I'm fine either way.
I vote for a short break.
Short break sounds good to me.
All right, why don't we come back at 12:15? We'll see you then.
Off the record.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Doug, are you with us?
You're on the record, Your Honor.
All right. All right, Verizon, Mr. Clemens, Ms. Paiva?
Yes. Are we ready to go?
I believe so.
Will we call Peter J. D'Amico? Did you want to swear him in first?
Sure. Sir, if I can get you to raise your right hand, please. You swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes,
Thank you, sir. Can you state your name and please spell it for the record?
sure. It's Peter D'Amico, Peter, D'Amico, D, capital D, apostrophe, capital A, M-I-C-O.
Thank you very much. Ms. Paiva?
Yes. Mr. D'Amico, do you have before you the document we've marked as Verizon Exhibit 1, which is the direct testimony of Peter J. D'Amico, dated January 22nd, 2021?
Yes,
And do you also have before you the document we've marked as Verizon Exhibit 2, which is the reply testimony of Peter J. D'Amico, dated February 19th, 2021?
yes,
And were those two pieces of testimony prepared by you or under your direct supervision and control?
yes,
And if you were asked the same questions today, would your answers be the same?
yes,
Do you have any corrections to make to the testimony?
no,
All right, Your Honor, then I would move for the admission of Verizon Exhibits 1 and 2, and we do have some rejoinder testimony.
Sure. We'll mark Mr. D'Amico's direct as Verizon Exhibit 1 and 2 for identification. Any objections to their admission?
No objections from core.
All right, hearing none, they are admitted. Ms. Paiva?
Okay. Before I get started, are you hearing me okay?
yes.
Mr. D'Amico, first, I want to ask you about the issue with the POI, point of interconnection. So to set the stage, could you just very briefly describe the disagreement between the parties regarding the financial responsibility for core delivering traffic to the switch serving the Verizon end user?
Your Honor, if I may, a soft objection. I understood that rejoinder would be limited to matters brought forth in reply testimony. So as long as we're doing that, I'm fine, but just want to make sure that's where we are.
Yeah, I'll softly sustain your objection, sir. And Ms. Paiva, if you could just kind of keep it to his, to keep it to Mr. Mingo's rebuttal or reply, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes. Well, I was going to ask about that, but I just wanted the question to have some context. So is it okay if he just briefly describes what the disagreement is so he can then?
I for one, appreciate the context. So.
All right. Then I guess, Mr. D'Amico, you can go ahead and very briefly answer the question.
Sure. So Core's position is basically that they want to have a point of interconnection at one of the Verizon tandems, and then their financial responsibility from their ends. Whereas Verizon's position is that's fine in a ladder where there's one tandem, but in 3 of the 4 other ladders in Maryland, Verizon has 2 tandems. And so Verizon's position is that Core's financial responsibility is to get to the tandem that serves the end office that serves the customer in order to get connection to the entire ladder.
Okay, and so in connection with that issue that you just described, Mr. Mingo's reply testimony at the top of page 2, he discusses, and I believe he actually discussed this today as well, but he discusses what he calls the calling party pays model, and the FCC's 2011 order that adopted a bill and keep framework, and suggests that this FCC order means that the calling party is no longer responsible for the cost of the facilities to transport the call all the way to the called party's end user. Do you have a response to this discussion?
Yes. I think they're mixing 2 different concepts. Bill and keep only addresses usage-sensitive charges associated with terminating usage. So to that extent, the FCC, has ordered that those rates are zero, and so that's correct. However, the FCC bill and keep order has no impact on non-usage sensitive elements such as facilities, and so therefore, yes, the bill and keep does apply to the usage, but in this case, we're also talking about the financial responsibility of the facilities to get to the point on Verizon's, to get to Verizon's tandem.
And so Mr. Mingo's reply testimony at the bottom of page 2, he says each party must bring its originating traffic to a single POI, point of interconnection, of the receiving party's choosing. Does that mean that financial responsibility for delivering the traffic ends at that single POI?
No, the point of interconnection is really just the physical interconnection point, but it doesn't eliminate the associated financial responsibilities.
All right. Now, the next thing I'm going to ask you about the two trunk types. I think we already had enough testimony to give it some context. The local interconnection trunks and the access toll connection trunks. And Core said, they're not going to use the access toll connection trunks. So we're really talking about local interconnection trunks here. Guess I would say, so if we're only talking about local interconnection trunks or 251C2 trunks, as Mr. Mingo called them, what would happen if Core tried to deliver traffic destined to an IXC over one of these trunks?
Because of the required signaling and outpulsing on the local interconnection trunks versus the outpulsing and signaling on a access toll connecting trunks, if Core or any other CLEC tried to route traffic destined to an inter-exchange carrier over local trunks, the call would fail.
And so Mr. Mingo's reply testimony, and I think he said it also here today, but in his reply testimony at page 3, lines 6 through 8, he says, he basically is answering a question that says that yes, IXC traffic can be sent over interconnection trunks, but he specifically says Verizon routinely sends Core exchange access traffic over local interconnection trunks to Core for termination to Core's customers. There's no technical reason why Core cannot similarly send Verizon exchange access traffic over local interconnection trunks. What is your response to that?
I don't agree with that. Again, it may not matter since Core is saying that they use an alternate tandem provider. However, to the extent that they wanted to route a call to an interexchange carrier over a local interconnection trunk group, they have to signal the carrier identification code or KIC code associated with that interexchange carrier so that Verizon Switch knows who to send it to. And so that capability is not available on an interconnection trunk. It's only designed or allowed on an access toll connecting trunk. So again, if they tried to send a call to a IXC over a local group, the call would fail.
And is Verizon sending any type of exchange access traffic to Core over these local interconnection trunks?
Verizon may be sending access traffic, intra-LATA access traffic from Verizon's customers to Core to their telephone numbers, but Verizon is not sending any inter-exchange carrier traffic, any traffic from an inter-exchange carrier to Core. And again, this ties into the LERG. To the extent that Core is subtending alternate tandem providers, tandems in the LERG, and think of the LERG, the local exchange routing guide, is kind of a map. So that if an inter-exchange carrier in California has a call to a particular NXX associated with a end office, it looks in the LERG and says, oh, this goes to Maryland, to Annapolis, or to Baltimore, Maryland, and it's associated with Core. And so they look in the LERG and it says either send it to Verizon's Future Group D tandem, or send it to Peerless, or send it to IntelliQuint, whoever they have in the LERG. So to the extent that a call would be misrouted to Verizon's tandem when the LERG says that it's, subtending some other tandem, then that call should not be routed to Core. And if the LERG is not changed, that is the reason why Core would need to have access toll connecting trunks so that Verizon could route that traffic to Core.
Or alternatively, just make sure the LERG is correct.
Spevia, you've got to speak up. You're just too low.
Alternatively, you could just make sure that the LERG was correct on the subtending, correct?
Correct. If they have all the LERGs, correctly, then an interexchange carrier would have no reason to send it to Verizon. We're out of the picture. We're basically bypassed in that scenario. Core does not need to have access toll connecting trunks, period.
Okay. Again, in Mr. Mingo's reply testimony at page 3, lines 15 through 19, he states the distinction between local and access switches and trunks is an archaic concept. The modern switch can handle any type of traffic that is under discussion in this proceeding. The same goes for meet point billing arrangements, which reflect a 1980s version of network architecture. There's no technical basis for separate trunk groups, and with the advent of bill and keep for intercarrier compensation, there is no accounting distinction either. Do you have a response to that?
Yes. I mean, even Verizon's so-called archaic switches can handle both access and non-access traffic. So that isn't really the issue. The issue is the trunk group. And there's industry standards associated with what a trunk group can do, what a local interconnection trunk group can do versus what an access toll connecting trunk group versus 911 or operator services. So there's distinct parameters associated with a trunk group. So, to kind of focus on the switch doesn't really answer the question. The other thing is for bill and keep, again, bill and keep only addresses terminating usage. And that is, a call that is terminated to a particular carrier switch. There is zero for compensation. But it doesn't impact originating access, which is traffic in the other direction, or tandem switching when it involves a non-ILEC office. And so even though bill and keep may be an old established process, it's still fundamental and in the industry practices where both parties would bill the interexchange carrier. So in the example of Core sending a call to an interexchange carrier, Core is entitled to bill originating access to the interexchange carrier, and Verizon is entitled to bill tandem switching to the interexchange carrier. So what meet point billing is it's basically the carrier, the interexchange carrier, getting multiple bills based on multiple tariffs. So it gets a bill from Verizon, it gets a bill from Core for the originating access. So that is why these concepts are still relevant, and that is why it really isn't dependent on the particular switch.
Okay. Moving on to another subject. Do you have a response to Mr. Mingo's discussion at the top of page 5 of his reply testimony regarding tandem transit traffic?
Yes. I heard earlier than this the goose and the gander concept, where Verizon isn't paying Core for traffic that's coming from a third party versus Core routing transit traffic to Verizon. And they're apples and oranges. The two don't relate. Let me start with the first premise where Verizon gets a call from a third party. So let's just say another CLEC, a competitive local exchange carrier, is connected to Verizon's tandem in Maryland and wants to send a call through Verizon to Core. Core is subtending Verizon's tandem. So that CLEC sends a call to our tandem. We charge that CLEC, the originating CLEC, transit. That call then gets sent to Core, and Core is due reciprocal compensation because the call is terminating to their end user, period. They're not performing a transit function. So to the extent that Core is due any money back before bill and keep, it would have been their obligation to go to the originating carrier and bill them reciprocal compensation. That issue is now not relevant because the rate is zero. Core also mentioned that they have no idea where these calls are coming from. And the way that transit is set up is that Verizon makes a billing record at the tandem and makes that record available either by some electronic medium or setting up a file where they can read that information so that Core or the terminating CLEC would have the appropriate information in that billing record to bill the originating party. Again, it's not relevant now because the rate is zero and there would be no need, but prior to bill and keep, they had that ability. So that is the scenario where Verizon is not paying reciprocal compensation because it doesn't come from a Verizon end user, it's coming from another CLEC end user. In the case in the other direction, Core is getting traffic from third parties. They are sending it to Verizon's tandem, and then that traffic is then routing to a third party. So in that scenario, a Verizon end user is never involved. Reciprocal compensation is not in play. And what Verizon is charging Core is for tandem transit, whether it originates from a Core end user or from a third party. And based on hearing what Core's business model is, they don't seem to have a whole lot of end user customers, end user being, a person or a customer that's buying local exchange service from them. They appear to be more like what I call a carrier's carrier. They're in the wholesale business, so they're saying, hey, bring this traffic to me, give this traffic to me, and I'll terminate it to whoever subtends Verizon's tandem on your behalf. So to me, there's just two distinct reasons why Verizon is not paying Core and why Core should be paying Verizon in the other direction. One is transit, one is reciprocal.
All right. And I guess a somewhat related question. So this is the same question I asked Mr. Mingo about. In the bottom of page 4 of his reply testimony, Mr. Mingo is asked the question about the situation where Core delivers non-Core originated traffic to Verizon and requires Verizon to deliver that traffic to a third party without any obligation to compensate Verizon for that tandem transit service, which is what you just discussed. Are there any negative consequences to Verizon in that situation?
Yes. The first negative consequence is Verizon is performing a transit service and is not being compensated for it. So that would be, high on my list. But there's also an impact to the industry. Transit is a competitive service, and a lot of carriers have left Verizon's tandem and gone to these what we call alternate tandem providers, ATPs. And so, that's fine. That's what the market is. And so if Core, which again is in the wholesale business, is going out to third parties and saying, hey, I can terminate your traffic to someone that subtends a Verizon tandem, and I can do it for less because I don't have costs that other carriers have, in particular the transit fee that Verizon pays, then they can basically undercut the market and have a competitive advantage to other wholesale carriers that are in the transit business.
All right, that's actually the end of my rejoinder question.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Vandenberg?
Just one question based on those questions. Mr. D'Amico, first of all, good to see you again. It's been a while.
Yes.
So we're talking about this third-party traffic, and so you testify that when Verizon sends core third-party traffic, it's not obligated to pay core anything. But if core sends Verizon third-party traffic, then core is obligated to pay Verizon. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you said that core focuses on wholesale services, but isn't Verizon's tandem transit service a wholesale service?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I had, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Ryan?
No questions, Your Honor.
Ms. McErley, Mr. Spivak?
No questions, Your Honor.
All right. Ms. Paiva, any redirect based on that question?
No redirect.
All right, okay. I guess I get to do my own heavy lifting. All right, how you doing, sir?
Good, Your Honor.
I appreciate you being here. I'll just kind of, I'll apologize in advance if I'm jumping around. Assurance of payment. Is the bankruptcy language contained in Verizon's proposal specific to core, or is that something that is typically included in other interconnection agreements?
It's pretty standard language that we have with all of our CLECs.
Okay. And I assume you're familiar with the language, sir?
Somewhat, yes.
There's I don't know if you have it in front of you. Just the very first page, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Under 6.3A, it's a little, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down. It says the other party is unable to demonstrate that it is creditworthy. When, oh, no, I'm sorry. I should go back, put it in context. In the requesting party's reasonable judgment at the effective date or any time thereafter, the other party is unable to demonstrate that it's creditworthy. And I'm just curious about the party's reasonable judgment. When would that come into play in your mind, if you know?
This really isn't my kind of area of expertise, but again, to me, the overall design of it is, it's just like any other corporation. When they're entering into an agreement, if there's some red flags, potential red flags, then they just want to make sure that there's an assurance of payment that we're not going to get to a point down the road where everything's gone and we have no recourse.
Understood, sir. Now, Core's position is that they have they've kind of disputed that this issue has been negotiated throughout this proceeding. I'm not sure how long you've been involved in this proceeding, but do you have a response to that as to whether or not, or do you agree with that position, sir?
I haven't been involved in this particular issue from the beginning, but I think that it really isn't dependent on time. To the extent that a particular carrier is in good credit standing on day one, then that's great. To the extent that they stay in that good credit standing, that's even better. But at some point, if that changes, then each party should be protected.
No, yeah, and I'm not necessarily disputing that, sir. I'm just curious as to if Core has all along maintained that they've never negotiated this, then why should we be considering it now? And I realize the commission decided this issue back in 2019, but here it is again.
I would just say that, I agree that it was decided, and why are we bringing it up again?
Okay, fair enough. With the VoIP PSTN traffic, I know that Verizon doesn't believe the definition should be included for a few reasons. Now, your objection is not to the definition itself, correct? It's just that it shouldn't be included in this agreement?
Correct.
Okay, and because it's not an IP agreement, is that correct?
Partly it's not an IP agreement. Excuse me. And also, in my mind, it marks traffic that is truly inter-exchange access traffic as potential, associated with local interconnection. And again, in this whole business of wholesaling, where there's local or there's least cost routing capabilities, there's carriers out there that's their business. And so in order to terminate that traffic to a particular ILEC, and say Verizon is the same as any other ILEC, then Verizon has access tariffs that rule how that traffic is billed. And granted, the usage associated with it is zero rated. It's bill and keep. That's fine. But there's also facility charges in the access tariff, which are higher than the uni rates, the unbundled network element rates. And there's also dedicated tandem trunk ports, which, if you compare inter-exchange carrier or long distance provider A, they have certain costs. And so their least cost routing tables to terminate traffic to Verizon have, those costs embedded in them. And so for Core to be able to route that traffic over local interconnection trunks and not pay any access charges similar to their competitor, again, they're getting an unfair competitive advantage, and they're shifting that usage that would have came somewhere else potentially through their network.
So technically, that VoIP PSTN traffic can be exchanged over local interconnection trunks, but it's an issue of billing. Is that correct?
Yes, because Core or it's converted to TDM, physically it can get terminated. It's really, like you said, an issue of compensation.
Okay. And I don't. You were here when I was discussing, or when Mr. Shockey was testifying. Is that correct, sir?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the reason it has to be converted from VoIP to TDM is because of Verizon's network. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, Verizon's tandems are TDM, time division multiplexing, and so they're just not. If someone tried to send a call in IP format, it just technically wouldn't work.
I hate to interrupt, but we've gone through a whole lot of TDMs. You said it was time division what?
Time division multiplexing.
Okay, hold on. I apologize for jumping in like this. Then you said ILEC. What the heck is that? And give me the all you can on that.
Incumbent local exchange carrier.
Okay. And what about PSTN?
Public switch telephone network.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your help.
And my apologies. I thought we'd covered a couple of those, but we should probably just get in the habit of doing it every time. Ms. Pavia, and you covered some of the questions I had. Let me see. if you could just give me a sec, bear with me for 1 second, please. Sir, do you have Mr. Mingo's testimony in front of you? His direct? And the only reason I'm referencing it, he's got a picture in there, and you took some, you were not a fan of it. It was on page 7 of his direct.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a table there or a diagram, and Core's position was that I guess double tandem switching, okay, in this situation, is that when it would just simply go from Verizon's tandem switch 1 to Verizon tandem switch 2?
Potentially. It's very inefficient for two tandems to connect. I mean, they are connected for overflow purposes, but in reality, there's actually a trunk group that goes from Core's network to the second tandem. So the trunking is actually there. It's really again a compensation issue.
Okay, so and if I understood your proposal, was Core would need to establish facilities at both tandem 1 and tandem 2 beyond the interconnection point. Is that correct?
Yes, and again, they already have those facilities. They already have those trunkings in place. It's just a matter of, do they pay for the connection from, their switch to tandem 2?
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. In Mr. Mingo's rebuttal,
I'm sorry, can I just add one other thing?
Absolutely.
In the other direction, Verizon is responsible to get its traffic to the Core switch. And even though Core may only have one switch that serves a particular LATA, I have had experience in the past where some of the larger competitive local exchange carriers have multiple switches. And to the extent that they have this similar type of arrangement where there's one-way trunking and each party is responsible to get to the other party's switch, Verizon does connect to both of their switches.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. Let's see. Where's the issue list? All right. With the issue list, if you have that handy, sir.
Yes, I do.
All right. And I kind of discussed some of this information with Mr. Mingo. If I could get you to look at page 4, sir.
Okay.
Under 2.1.2, just the last phrase where Verizon, it looks like the only difference is Verizon's says it's going to be subtended by the terminating Verizon end office, whereas Core's is, I guess, more general. It says by a terminating end office. What's the difference there in your mind?
Well, again, you could have a single tandem that has all of the end offices that subtend it. So basically, if you went to that tandem, you get the whole LATA. However, in 3 of the 4 LATAs in Maryland, Verizon has 2 tandems. So let's just say for, math purposes, there's 100 end offices in that particular LATA, and 50 of them subtend tandem 1 and 50 subtend tandem 2. So what Verizon is saying is, if you only want to get half the LATA, then you can connect to just tandem 1, but in order to get the entire LATA, you need to connect to both tandems. And we also have other CLECs, the competitive local exchange carriers, and wireless carriers and independent carriers that also subtend those Verizon tandems. And so that's why there's a need to be connected in certain circumstances to both tandems.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you, sir. Jumping down to the next paragraph, and this was something I asked Mr. Mingo about. On line 3, It just says, or using Verizon's facilities, and then Core has, or by leasing Verizon facilities. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think there's some legal, answer to leasing versus using, but,
Okay,
other than that, most people would say they're the same, but again, I think legally there is some difference.
okay, all right. Um, What is, in jumping down just a little further on 2.1.5, what is, and Verizon doesn't have a competing paragraph there. What's the main concern there, sir?
I guess the way I read it is, to the extent that there's multiple POIs, there could be a reason to have multiple POIs in a LATA where there's only one tandem, just for network design purposes. But I think what Verizon is saying is that to the extent that there are multiple tandems and that the CLEC wants to have the entire LATA, then there's compensation requirements to get to each tandem.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Skipping over to the next page, sir. There. Thought I saw something in here. Now it's escaping me, but it was called Feature Group D Trunks. You know what that is, sir?
Yes, a feature group D trunk is really an access term. Inter-exchange carriers use feature group D trunks to both originate or receive originating traffic or to terminate traffic to say Verizon, who is the ILEC, the incumbent local exchange carrier. So it's just a term in the tariff that defines it. It's basically a local interconnection trunk in the access world with some other caveats.
Okay.
And when I mentioned earlier that other inter-exchange carriers are terminating traffic to Verizon, that's what they're using. Feature group D trunks out of the interstate or intrastate access tariffs. And those include, facility charges and dedicated port charges. And so it gets into, a compensation of what the rates are and what are the applicable rate elements that are in the tariff versus what are in an interconnection contract.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. In Mr. Mingo's direct, he indicated that his understanding was that the FCC permitted interconnection trunks to carry any type of traffic as long as some of the traffic was either telephone exchange service or exchange access. Do you agree with that?
I'm not sure where specifically that is stated.
Page 9. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Didn't mean to cut you off. It was page 9, the top of his direct. My apologies. I should have directed you there. Lines 1 to 3.
Yes. What I was referring to was where in the FCC rules it has said that. Like I'm not specifically sure, but in my view, if the traffic can be terminated over that group, that may be appropriate, but again, it comes down to compensation. So that, if you have a CLEC that has 1 minute of local traffic for one end user, and then 99% of the traffic is coming from another state that's interlata typical access traffic, then I guess that's acceptable, or that may be appropriate, as long as they pay the appropriate charges for the proportion of traffic that is access. And you get to a point where, well, if it's 99% access, why don't you just order an access service out of the access, tariff? But if you get situations where it's maybe 80-20, 80 is local and 20, then for network efficiencies, maybe it's appropriate, as long as for that 20% of the traffic, the billing system can say, oh, if the charge is $100, then 20% of $100 is associated with access, and it should be, $20 instead of the full 100. That kind of stuff.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. If I can get you to jump back to the issues list, sir, if you have that handy.
Yes.
Page 7, section 4-4.4.
Okay.
Now, the main difference I see is Verizon wants to deliver trunks for, I'm sorry, last sentence. If Core requests interconnection over existing dedicated facilities in a new LATA, Verizon shall deliver the requested trunks within 120 days versus Core wanted 30. And the way I read your testimony, it seemed to indicate that Verizon was anticipating new facilities rather than existing.
Yes. To me, the issue here is Verizon has what we call entrance facilities into a lot of buildings. So basically what we do is, there's forecasting, and we say, oh, this building is here and there's a lot of tenants. And so our network doesn't over-engineer, but it also tries to accommodate, service into that building. And so a lot of times a CLEC will come and say, this is where my point of interconnection is in this building. And we say, fine, we have existing facilities, we have reserve capacity, that'll take 30 days. The other scenario would be, we do have existing facilities into that building, but they're maxed out. And so we have to pull another, DS3 or OC48. Again, a DS3 is just a volume of capacity. And so depending on the building, we may have to, run new conduit. We may have to do a lot of things to get into that building. And so, or it could be just as easy as just adding another facility. So I think what we're saying is, the faster we get something up and running, the better. We're not in the waiting business, but to the extent that we have to, either build something brand new or add something that's complicated, then we're saying we can't do that in 30 days, or we may not, we may not be able to do that in 30 days. I mean, if the president says do this in 30 days, we could probably do it, but we're trying to manage the business here. So what this is trying to address is, yeah, if we can do it in 30, great, but we don't want to be forced to do it when we can't.
Understood. Now, then you've got 30 days if there's interconnection over an existing loop facilities in a new LATA, but 120 days for existing dedicated facilities. What's the difference between the two?
Well, for a common facility, again, it's think of it as a size of a pipe, and so that's size, so that to add into that is not that big of a deal potentially, because that's been sized, and it's just a matter of putting more water into the pipe, as opposed to a dedicated facility, which we have to build something unique and separate only for Core. And again, we may be able to do that in 30 days, depending on the situation, but we may not. And so we would rather, say, If we can do it sooner, great, but we don't want to be restricted on a dedicated that's only going to be used for core or any other particular customer to be restricted to that 30 days.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that distinction. Now, in your rebuttal, you noted that the installation of new dedicated facilities could take 3 to 6 months. And I'm looking at, what you said that. Yeah, on line 4. Now, how does your 120 days match up with that 3 to 6 months? Or are you just kind of taking an average with the 120?
Well, the example that I gave you was kind of in a downtown kind of atmosphere where there's buildings and you know, but we have had occasions, and this may be more common in the wireless industry, where they have, say, a cell site on the top of a mountain, and they say, you know, we want to use this as our POI, and you know, we got to get a backhoe, we got to dig trench, you know, we're lucky we can walk up to the top of the mountain in 30 days. And so that's the unique situation where, you know, there's a lot of planning involved to get to that remote location. So I would say that's not the norm, but we still have to account for it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. If I could get you to jump back, and I apologize, to the issues list, sir.
Yep.
Page 8. Looking at 10.1.
Okay.
And again, I talked a little bit about this with Mr. Mingo, but I want to make sure I understand where you're coming from, and I think I do. Looks like the main difference is Verizon's has or a third party's network. I'm looking at the 3rd and 4th line down, whereas Core's does not, and it's only referencing traffic that originates on Core's network. And again, this is more of a billing issue. Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, we would be fine if the language said only from Core and that they would do that. We have no ability to monitor the traffic and say, oh, it's coming from Core, great. Oh, it's coming from a third party, block it, or you know, it's not appropriate. So knowing that, then we added this language to say, you know, if you want to send third party, that's great, but we're going to treat that as though you're sending it because we can't differentiate it. And again, unlike the transit scenario that I described earlier, where we send billing records, we don't have a way to receive those records. We're not sure if anybody could send us those records, and we're recording on that trunk group, so we would not be able to parse out bill this transit versus don't bill that transit based on the originating party.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. And if I could get you to jump down to 10.4, and my question is really, it's on the second page, page 9. It's the billing issue, whereas Verizon wants Core to pay a monthly rate equal to 50% of the transit service billing fee. Wait, I'm sorry. No. Yes. Okay. But Core has provided, however, that the transit service billing fee shall not exceed 1/2 of New York's access billing costs. What's the difference there, sir, in your mind?
Well, I mean, I will agree that this is something that is outdated. At one time, for Verizon.
Wait, you said agree. You guys agree on something, okay?
At one time, Verizon used an alternate vendor. I think it was called the New York Access Pool, because we didn't have the capabilities in the early days to record the usage and to send the records and all that. So we used a third party. And so this is associated with those fees and stuff like that. In today's world, we got rid of that vendor and took it in-house many, many years ago. And so to me, this doesn't apply. We do not have a transit service billing fee. We do not, bill any of that. We do not have any penalties for that. We basically just have a commission approved, Maryland State Commission approved transit rate, and that's all we bill.
All right. Thank you, sir. With the robocall mitigation, sir, is and I understand that this hasn't been an issue. Is your concern with including it, and aside from that, it hasn't been negotiated, is the concern that it's not appropriate to include this language in this particular agreement?
Yes. I think earlier today, somewhere it pointed to my testimony that I said it was technically infeasible to do IP interconnection, and that wasn't my exact response. My response was, you can't exchange traffic in IP format over the existing TDM contract that we have in the facilities. And so this is kind of in the same bucket, that I agree this is important, but it's not appropriate because it doesn't really deal with TDM interconnection. It's really an IP issue in the IP world.
Okay, so when June or July comes around, well, yeah, it's okay. Don't. So actually, in theory, if we were going to put this in here, there would be more things that would need to change in the interconnection agreement. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, you would pretty much have to blow it up and just start all over.
As much fun as that might be, we've already been going here for 17 years or so. All right. With the pricing schedule, sir, I believe you said, thought you might have said that it was a legal issue. If court raises any factual assertions, I may reply to those. That's on page 12. I guess that's more of a question for your counsel, but all right, I won't put you on the spot for that.
I can give you a kind of a general answer.
That'd be fantastic. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't want to call you out there, but if you're willing to dive in, please do.
Well, again, I heard previously that, Verizon's always trying to, make carriers order stuff out of the tariff. And there's certain situations where if it's applicable to have a tariff rate, a public approved tariff rate, then there's no need to put it in the interconnection agreement, because those tariffs can change over time. And so then you're double administrating all of the things. Whereas if there's something that's not in the tariff, then that can be, hard coded, if you will, into the interconnection agreement. And so to me, the unbundled network element rates, the TELRIC rates, TELRIC, I'm going to get confused here. Total element, long run, something, cost.
Incremental
Cost. If they were approved by the Maryland Commission at whatever date, then to me, those are the rates, and they remain in effect until someday that they get changed. And so just like a tariff, rates are subject to change in the future. To hard code a rate takes both parties to agree, okay, we're just going to come up with this rate, and we never want to change it, we both agree, period. But that isn't the case for, either the tariff rates or for the unbundled network element rates.
All right. Thank you, sir. I think that's all I have. Ms. Pavia, do you have any questions based on mine?
No, I don't have any questions.
Mr. Vandenberg?
No questions based on your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ryan?
No questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Spivak?
No questions, Your Honor.
Okay. I guess we're done for the day then? 1:10, not too bad. Does anyone have anything else?
No, I have a administrative question about ordering the transcripts, but I think we can do that off the record.
Yeah, we can handle that with Doug. And I believe we already set a briefing schedule. I believe the first round's April 16th, if I'm correct.
Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
I have some questions for Cross. Did I miss my gap? I thought that we were doing rejoinder. Did we go through all that?
Well, I thought you were we only had one. I certainly didn't mean to jump, sir.
I may have missed a gap. I thought we were going from rejoinder to your questions about rejoinder. If not, I apologize.
It's okay. Yeah, you only had one question. I was a little surprised by that, but we're here, and I really don't want to have that be the reason that this case gets kicked back.
I apologize if I missed my turn. I have four questions for Cross, so hopefully make it real quick.
That's fine. He hasn't. He had his chance. He didn't run. So, Mr. D'Amico, you're okay. You're a witness, sir.
Okay, Mr. D'Amico, turning to page 2 of your reply testimony. Let's see, lines 19 through 21. You're talking about applicable access charges, including usage charges and facilities such as dedicated transport and trunk ports. I'd like to just kind of break those down really quick. Usage charges, what are usage charges?
Usage charges would be, your typical per minute of use charge. And so in today's environment, there used to be a rate element called local switching, which was associated with the switching and the end office switch. There was tandem switching. There's other common usage sensitive transport charges. But again, all of those under the bill and keep regime for terminating usage have been, moved to zero.
So whether it's reciprocal compensation for, let's call it local traffic or 251B5 traffic, or it's access rates for long distance or exchange access traffic, all of those rates have gone to zero for terminating traffic, correct?
Yes. Okay,
great. And so when you refer to facilities such as dedicated transport and trunk port, what are those? What's dedicated transport and what are trunk ports?
So dedicated transport would be the equivalent of inter-office mileage in the unbundled network element regime or world. It's basically a connection that's from the carrier's point of interconnection to the terminating switch. And it's dedicated, so it's only used for that particular carrier. And in the access world, it's called direct trunk transport. And typically it has a fixed charge, so a monthly charge, and then it has a monthly per mile charge. And so that's dedicated transport. The other element is in the access world, when a long distance carrier or an interchange carrier connects to a Verizon access tandem, there's a dedicated trunk port. So there's a piece of equipment that's used to connect that trunk into the Verizon tandem. And so that is, again, billed on a non-usage sensitive recurring charge.
Okay, so just a couple more follow-ups. Dedicated transport is priced differently I take it, based on your testimony, if it's a local interconnection trunk, a dedicated transport would be a TELRIC rate based on the uni dedicated transport. Is that correct?
Yes,
But if it was a access toll connecting trunk, that same function would be billed under a Verizon access tariff at a higher rate. Yes.
yes.
Yes. Okay, great. And as to trunk ports, you said trunk ports are billed out of access tariff. So I take it that trunk ports charges would only apply on an access toll connecting trunk, but not on a local interconnection trunk. Is that correct?
Well, yes and no. To the extent that the local interconnection trunk is delivering local traffic, then no, the dedicated trunk port would not apply because that cost was built into the reciprocal compensation charges, and those charges are now zero. To the effect that there is inter exchange access traffic, again, coming from California or somewhere outside of the state or outside of the LATA, then it would be appropriate because the access tariffs at some point in time basically separated the trunk port from the tandem switching charge. And so we were basically ordered by the commission to separate the charges. And so that's where the dedicated trunk port charge was created associated with access.
Got it. Thank you. Let's see. Going back to the back and forth with Mr. Mingo and the judge about existing versus dedicated facilities. Do you understand Mr. Mingo's testimony that the same 30-day interval should apply to existing facilities, whether they're on a loop facility or whether they're dedicated to core?
Yes, I understand his position, but as I mentioned, we may be able to meet that in both scenarios, but it's something we can agree to on the loop part because it's a common facility as opposed to we would have to potentially build a dedicated facility, which again may only take 30 days, but it could be that we're at capacity in that particular building and that we would need to, to do an engineering order to put new facilities into there.
I hate to keep beating this horse, but if Mr. Mingo is testifying that he only wants a 30-day interval applying to an existing dedicated facility, where does the new construction come in?
Well, I guess it's semantics on existing. If let's just say Core has a pipe and that's an existing facility. So that pipe can only get so full. So if they then say, I need another pipe, then we may just be able to add to that. But there are situations where all of the pipes are reserved for other, carriers or, the forecasting that we had said that we're not going to need this capacity. And so that's where it's going to take potentially more time to build an added capacity. And in my mind, that really isn't existing because it's the same, but it's still potentially a brand new piece of equipment that we need to install.
Do you think there might be a simple legal writing fix? I know you're not an attorney, but maybe we could work on that just to exclude those circumstances and settle this issue. Maybe something for me to take up with Susan. Let's see.
Yeah,
moving on. Yep, sorry.
I don't know if in the real world we have this issue. I mean, the problem that we have is, we may never have had this issue. We may never have it. But if this language becomes in this contract, then another carrier could say, I want that same language, and their situation could be totally different. And then we're on the hook to, to do things that we physically, it's difficult to do.
Okay. Let's see. Going to the last page, page 7 of your reply testimony. And just looking at lines 4 and 5, you say Core should receive TELRIC rates on a limited universe of interconnection facilities for local traffic, not for switched access traffic to which tariff rates still apply. Now, when you say switched access traffic to which tariff rates still apply, did we establish earlier that currently no rates apply to traffic per se, to usage?
Correct, to usage, but in this reference, and again, when I say switched access, that's another term for long distance traffic or inter-exchange access traffic. It's, those terms are interchangeable. So it's not really a usage issue on the terminating side. It's really the associated facilities, the dedicated transport, and the potential to have a dedicated trunk port.
So even though the traffic is, the minutes, the usage is billed at 0, there's still charges for facilities which carry that traffic.
Right, right. The access tariff ties the two together. You can't really have one without the other. And so it says in order to have this usage, which is 0 rated, you still need to have, these particular associated recurring charges.
Okay, great. And then moving on to line 7 of that same page, you state that it would be unfair to the other carriers that pay access. Wouldn't the competitive response, or maybe wouldn't the solution be for Verizon to charge all carriers at TELRIC? Wouldn't that eliminate the competitive advantage or disadvantage?
Well, again, we have access tariffs, and those are in place. Those are approved by the FCC for the interstate and approved by the Maryland Commission for the intrastate. I guess if at some point we were ordered to do that, or if it seemed to be a good idea, but that's really irrelevant. The tariffs are there, they're approved, and we need the traffic to all carriers that are doing the same type of traffic to adhere to those tariffs.
But Verizon could alter its tariffs, or it could make an agreement with CLEX to charge them only TELRIC, correct?
I'm not sure about that. I mean, tariffs are, publicly available documents. I don't know if, even if we wanted to, if Verizon would be able to, we could file something in the tariff, but I don't know that we could do side deals that say for this exact kind of traffic that everybody else is paying out of the tariff, that we're going to have some kind of a side deal. I just
So you're not aware that the FCC permits LEX to enter into switched access agreements at rates other than those set forth in their access tariffs?
No, I'm not aware of that.
Okay. Last question or two refers to the rates, the TELRIC rates, and again on page 7 of your reply testimony at lines 10 and 11. You state the current TELRIC rates were submitted by Verizon on January 20, 2005 in compliance with order number 79696. And that's in case 8882, correct?
I believe so.
Okay. The uni TELRIC proceeding before Maryland. Correct?
Yes.
And were did Verizon ever submit those rates that you referred to into the record of this case?
I'm not sure, but those rates are what Verizon charges for unbundled network elements in Maryland to other competitive local exchange carriers.
And so would Verizon be willing to enshrine those rates in the ICA we're discussing today?
If they comply with the approved Maryland unbundled network, the TELRIC order, then I don't see why not. But again, we'd probably have to make sure that when we brief it, that makes sense.
Great. That's all I had, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vandenberg. And again, I apologize if I jumped over you, if there was a misunderstanding. I just thought you had a very short cross, so. But I appreciate your discussions with Mr. D'Amico. Sir, those, the TELRIC rates you were just discussing, am I correct that those those rates are in your current tariff?
I don't know that we have a uni tariff in Maryland. But if we do, then I would think they're in there. But typically, if we don't have an unbundled network element tariff in a particular state, they're in our model interconnection pricing attachment.
Okay, but just the current rates were submitted by Verizon, so I'm sure the commission probably has them in that docket. Would be my guess.
I would suspect, yes.
It was a compliance filing in that docket, which we can provide it to you and the parties if you want it.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Ms. Paiva, do you have any follow-up based on Mr. Vandenberg's cross or my questions?
No,
okay.
I don't have anything else.
Ms. Ryan?
No questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Mackerline, Mr. Spivak, anything?
No questions, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. So it looks like our briefing schedule is April 16th and May 7th. Does that still work for everyone?
Yeah.
All right. I'm seeing everybody nod. All right. Anything else before we end today's hearing?
Nothing for court, Your Honor.
Okay. I appreciate everyone's testimony. Appreciate your patience, and look forward to your briefs. And to the extent you can be specific. If you're referring to an attachment, if you could just, it was kind of general in the final issue list. So if you could just be specific, I'd appreciate it. Just so I know what I think you mean. And I know where I think the document is, but just to make sure I'm working off the same sheet of music as everyone else is, that would be helpful, okay? All right, and with that, we are done. Doug, we're off the record.
Thank you,
Off
Your
the
Honor.
record, Your Honor.
Thank you all.
Thank
The
you.
one administrative question regarding the transcripts.
Yes.
How do we,
Who's talking to me first off?
hi, this is Keith Clemens from Verizon.